Kat Johnson, welcome. And I think I have to make a public apology to both of you since I was trying to mess with our recording platform. So it's taken us a few minutes to get started. And you're both coming off of like vacation. So hopefully you still had the Zen with you. Gio's like ready to reach through the screen and strangle me. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really curious where this conversation's going to go.
Right. Because we don't prep, we're Flex Uncensored. So
curious as we are.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
Exactly.
I think that's where the best stuff comes out, is when you just start going and then see where we go.
Okay, so for those who are listening who have not encountered Kat before, which seems impossible, but Kat, I think this is your first time on either of the podcasts. So so excited to have you here. So excited for our conversation. So Kat, your title on LinkedIn is industry leading content strategist and brand community coach for co-working space operators. So I'll let you kind of fill that in, but you run an amazing marketing program called The Lab. You have a fabulous community, and you run the Convos, which I think are monthly kind of sessions about topics that are really kind of timely and relevant to the industry. And you pull together thought leaders, and you have a fantastic newsletter that I like to read every week. And you recently talked about some of your learnings. Girl, you need to take a vacation more often. I'm going to be your new accountability buddy on that.
I love it. And I will totally take you up on it. I had no idea how much I needed it, how off balance I had gotten with like work being the entirety of my life, with like trying to fit in wellness here and there. But having 2 weeks of relaxing and family and just like, a few emails here and there, a few little pop-ins with the lab, but it was really, really good reset. And I feel like now I can come back to my work better.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They say that, but it's hard to convince yourself. And what I kind of heard you say from your email is like, you love your work. And so it's not like you have this corporate job where you're on Zoom. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He's like, I have 13 Zoom calls some days. I was like, I want to poke my eyeballs out. And that's when you're like, I need a vacation, right? So you probably fall into the trap a little bit of like, well, I love my work, but what did you say about running at like an 11?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of have painted myself into a corner with content creation and coaching and teaching and podcasts and convos in the lab, and every single thing is really thought out. It's very intentional, and sometimes it's a lot. Like I try to stay kind of on the wave, and sometimes it's like, how is any of this going to work? Right? Like in the the deep hours of the night, sometimes I'm like, wow, this is a lot.
You have the wake up moment and just feel like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I do that sometimes.
I know. I'm sure you do. Yeah. It can get a lot. And I'm so grateful that, my work just lights me up. The people in co-working, as you know, I've been in co-working for a long time, and it originally and still remains just an amazingly inspiring group of people.
So what's a long time?
I was going to say, so I don't want to, you should tell your origin story. And then Gio just came back from 10 days in Alaska. Gio is actually pretty good at mixing in like work and play, but you're not usually, I was like, Gio, I need to talk to you about something. He's like, okay, tomorrow morning at 5:30, I'm going to walk to the library in town, and I'm going to stand outside the window and use their Wi-Fi.
So I've never disconnected in my 20-year career like I did for 4 days. So literally I had Wi-Fi by the library and by the pub. And that was
like
it.
Not in your room, not on the boat. You couldn't constantly be like, refresh.
Yeah, like
and it was amazing, right? So and I come back refreshed to a new platform that we're trying to
totally.
So it was awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But Kat, I mean, what's the origin? How long? How? All that fun stuff that a lot of people don't know, including myself, funny enough.
Yeah.
I know, Kat, I feel like we think everybody knows our story because we're so visible, but I think people don't. And certainly we might have a different audience on this podcast too, so people may not know your story. So tell us all the details.
I will. I appreciate it. And it's funny because people I assume everybody knows what co-working is, but I meet people all the time who are like, what is that? I'm like, oh, okay, backpedal. Okay, so my origin story, for 20 years, I worked in record stores, like vinyl, music, hung out with music nerds and artists all day. It was super fun. I loved it. Saw more concerts than I can ever recall. And I also knew there was something more that I wanted to be doing. There was this little like, oh, I wasn't really tapping into my creativity, or didn't feel like I was kind of pursuing my potential. So I reached out to the local alt weekly paper and asked them about doing some music writing. And the editor was like, where have you been? Come in today, let's get something going. So almost immediately I started doing like arts and culture writing for the weekly. And that pretty quickly morphed in from arts and culture into doing more community-based stuff. Like I wrote about a local community garden and these kind of things, started writing about the sharing economy, and then discovered co-working. I was like, oh, what's this thing? And this is back in 2010, 2011. So co-working was still very much like a DIY movement, right? Where everyone was just kind of trying to figure out what this thing even was. And some of the best practices, everyone was working from like spreadsheets and things. So I wrote about co-working as frequently as publications would let me. I started pitching co-working articles to other places, right? And people were like, well, you just did one, so let's hit pause on that. And simultaneously, I wanted to join a co-working space. So there were a couple in Santa Cruz, and one of them was running a special that was like $79 a month if you signed for a year. And I thought like, oh, apples and oranges, just like, okay, I'll join this one because it's a good deal. Well, I joined thinking I was going to join this robust community. And what it really was desk rental. Like people wouldn't engage. I would just kind of go in and sit there at a desk for some hours and then go home or go to my record store job. And I quickly realized that is not at all what co-working was or what I wanted.
Where's
so
the
I just
coast,
stopped.
right?
I just stopped going. I was like,
Yeah.
I could do this at home. I remember one time I was standing in line to get coffee and I started like chatting with the person in front of me, and they looked at me like, why are you talking to me? I'm like, okay, this is not it. So I waited until my year contract was up, walked over to Next Space Santa Cruz, met Jeremy and Iris immediately. And I was like, I thought I needed a space, but what I need is a community. And they were like, you found us. And I'm so, so grateful because I got dropped into, just a shining example of what a co-working community is. It was fully formed. It was fully activated. There was this mutually supportive vibe from day one. I was collaborating and connecting, and it just like showed me exactly what co-working could be. And at the same time, rather than writing about co-working, I was like, I want to be part of this movement. How can I kind of help from the inside? So what I was noticing, that spaces were great at building community, spaces were great at like having the facilities and stuff, but they weren't great at marketing. I'm like, well, I'm a natural writer, I'm a natural communicator. I'm like, oh, I can help with this. So I started just creating content around content marketing, helping people with that. And it really has been kind of a long and windy road. Like at first I thought what I was selling was that I would do the posts for people and do the content for people. But I quickly realized that is entirely unscalable. And the moment of truth where I had written a blog post for a space that I had never been to and probably never would be. And it felt like, I'm a little too disconnected from this. I felt like I couldn't write in the way I like to write, like very human, very real, very kind of story-based, if I didn't even know what I was talking about, right? Because I was writing about this space from afar. So over the years, started doing more teaching, more group things that I could bring in more people and teach everyone at once, kind of help empower operators how to do it, how to think about the strategy of it. And then during COVID. Just before COVID, we launched Coworking Convos. It was a beta test, and then it really fully formed during COVID. And then the lab is very much a product of COVID. It was an idea I had been kicking around for a while. Jamie, you and I probably talked about it at some point, having like a private group, and the moment was right to launch it because we were all just sitting at home. So kind of put that into motion. And I like to keep all of my projects really loose and let them become what they are. Like you launch it and then let it grow and kind of form itself. And the lab and Convos too, but they're good examples of that. So that pretty much brings us current. We're about to hit the 3-year anniversary of the lab. Convos is 3.5 years old now. And the teaching, speaking, presenting, that's where I'm really focusing my energy. It's just lighting me up.
So when you say that, I mean, obviously there's several topics that you are incredibly well qualified to discuss and talk about, but what are you really passionate about?
Well, if you asked me this 3 years ago, I would say content marketing and content strategy. But what I'm looking at now is this kind of higher overall piece of the whole brand where content's a part of it, community building is a part of it, communications is a part of it, thought leadership, like establishing yourself as a leader in your community. It all kind of lends itself to this brand community piece. That's where I'm really kind of pushing forward into and doing strategy and helping people with that. So that's what's really getting me right now.
Yeah, I just love how passionate you are, period, right? I love seeing you at conferences and you've always got people around you and everyone's laughing and it's like you hold court in a corner every time I see you. So, it's awesome.
Oh, thanks, Gio. I hope that my enthusiasm for coworking never dwindles because it's been a wild ride. Like what coworking is now is not what it was when I joined. And I think that's a really good thing. I try not to get caught in what things were. It's like, how can I help shape where we're going with this? And that's why, Jamie, when you read my LinkedIn bio, it intimidates me a little bit to say industry leading, but I like to think of that as like helping to shape where we're going and making sure the community piece is intact and that we're aligned with what coworking has always been and don't drift too far into desk rental territory.
Yeah, which we'll see some of, right? I think we struggle with the definition because I think you probably would be a purist around like, please don't call that co-working. We'll call it flexible office, which, may live closer to desk rental, as we see landlords kind of get into the game, depending on how they approach and who operates, and the industry is shifting a lot. I think you have, you have a lot of like power and responsibility because you see what operators are struggling with. Like, I think the same thing about myself. Sometimes I'm like, we have such a unique view around what they're struggling with, what's happening, like, in the weeds, like on the ground floor. So I love what, you talking about. Like, I try not, this is totally the opposite of me. I don't think she's a 3 Geo. Cause when she said, I just like to put things out there and, let it be what it should be. I was like, but I love it because I overthink, like, I think I should know, exactly what I'm putting out. And sometimes, right, you need to let people show you what do they need and what's the container and how's this gonna, how does this work for them? So,
well, and just to clarify, I definitely overthink everything. And there's a lot of strategy that goes into like, what's the first piece of this? Like, and I know that it's going to change. Like I feel with every project, I've just been talking with my sister a lot about this. You can't get stuck at the starting line because it 100% will change.
Right.
You have to be brave enough to be like, here we go, and just shove off into the water.
I was listening to a podcast. I had some driving this week, and the guy said he thinks of everything new that he does as an experiment, which like you have to, right? But that's not my natural personality. My natural personality is like, I got to get this right. I got to nail it. But it's like, then you don't get stuck in the analysis paralysis, right? So, okay,
Yeah.
this is an experiment. I'm making a decision. I will learn and I will continue it or I will change it. Like a scientific experiment. I have a hypothesis that this is one way to do it. We'll gather data and then we'll decide. Yeah.
Yep. And as you said, like having, I don't want to say 24/7 contact with operators, but sometimes it's like that. Sometimes the Slack is just like nonstop, and really seeing it's like I can course correct, you can course correct around those kind of immediate things that someone might not put on a public platform or share publicly, but like we have a cry it out channel in the lab, and it's all those little things. One time someone had a snake in their space and they're like, oh my God, there's a snake.
Oh my God.
Or like, oh, I have a member who's not paying this,
Yeah.
or how do you handle this or whatever? Just these like really immediate things up to like super high level, like we're, brand strategy and newsletters and LinkedIn and all of that stuff. But yeah, I think it's an honor to have such close connection with the operators.
Yeah, well, that's how you see what works and what doesn't work, right? I mean, getting to actually touch it, feel it, see it. I mean, I have a lot of respect for you, for coming to the conclusion that you couldn't write about a space you hadn't seen, right? And it's hard to do. And I think that we've got a lot of that out there is from different angles, right? Everybody think from the operators to vendors to brokers to landlords is they're making decisions without really touching, feeling, seeing, understanding. It always goes back to what's the why, right? For me, and really understanding why are we putting this space in, why are we putting this operation in this space, and what's it going to do for the entire building, what's it going to do for the community, what's it going to do for the overall environment around that building, right? Is who's coming to it and why. And I think actually going out and having these conversations, that 24/7 engagement, like you said, makes such a big difference in that.
Yeah. And I think my sense is that as co-working continues to grow and grow and grow and grow, that more and more people are going to lean into the piece about member engagement, whether they want to call it community or what, like a flat space where people just go in and rent an office or a desk or a meeting room. Sometimes it's all that's needed, but it's very transactional. So if a space comes in that's closer, they're going to bounce. If a space comes in that has a lower meeting room rate, they're going to bounce. So I think even people who are just doing it kind of as a real estate thing, like, oh, I have this building, this space, I'm going to create a flex space. I have zero problem with that, because I feel like in the end, what they're trying to do is get people into a shared space. And at some point they'll figure out they need to get those members there. There needs to be energy in that space. And the way that you create energy is by having people interacting. And I've always felt with co-working and community building that if we say that our version of community only includes some certain type or group or way of thinking or whatever, then that's not community, right? I'd like to think that we could go into any kind of executive suite or flex space or whatever and find ways to create engagement. And some people are going to want a lot of programming and a lot of high touch stuff, and other people, they may just want the occasional way to connect with each other, or an occasional workshop or lunch and learn. But I feel like everybody is just inherent in our humanness that we want to connect and we want to be part of something. We want to have a sense of belonging. And even the people who think they only need an office, I think they like the kind of buzz of walking in the door of a space. And there's just some energy being around people who are doing cool things.
We're all humans in the end, right?
For sure.
I think about that. It's so it can be so minor, and yet it is so important. I went to a new CrossFit gym last weekend, and the coach came over and shook my hand, which was really nice, but didn't, oh, what are you in town for? Or how long have you been doing CrossFit? Like none of that, which is very easy, right?
Right.
And it was an all women class, which is unusual. And so I was kind of like, oh, this will be, kind of fun. They knew each other very well. And so I was like, definitely not, on the inner circle. And it was kind of at the end, one of the girls who's also a coach, but was doing the class, came over and asked me like, yeah, how long are you in town? Are you coming next week? And she said, oh, on the 4th of July, we do a partner workout, and like was engaging me. And for like 3 minutes, not like this huge thing, but that was the thing that made me say, okay, I think like it's probably worth coming back. Like I don't, it was so minor, but it took until the very end of class for someone to, and I always think about that in sort of the analog to co-working. It's like, it can be so minor. I didn't need someone to like hold my hand through class, but I wanted to feel like invited, I wanted to feel a little bit a part of something, because there's another gym I can go work out at. Like I don't need to go there. And it's just like reminding people it's so simple, and yet it almost didn't happen, and I think that is common. It can be really common. Like whoever's in charge of that engagement is like busy, doing the things and doesn't, make those little connections. And it just takes a little bit. And it made a huge difference for me.
Totally. I think space operators forget how kind of overwhelming it is to be dropped into a community, or not even a community, a co-working space with people milling about. You don't know
each other
anyone.
already.
You don't, there's just nothing. There's no way to connect. You don't know what anyone does. I think the best thing people can do is when a new member joins, just introduce them around to a handful of people. Like, oh, Kat's in marketing. You're in marketing. You guys probably have some stuff to talk about. Like those little micro connections that kind of get the ball rolling. And then understanding that, like with your CrossFit analogy, it's like it would probably take like 3, 4, 5 times before you're like, oh, I really vibe with this person or whatever. Like those connections, I always think you can't hotwire the connection. It just takes time. I joined a golf league recently. Ooh. And I'm like the new person in 178 people. And it's a bit much, but like week after week after week after week, I start finding the person who are like, oh, we should play, but it takes a little bit. But if you can kind of help jumpstart those connections, it makes a profound difference for the members and for CrossFit people.
Exactly.
Yeah, they probably realized that she really knew what she was talking about or doing, right? And they were like, holy crap, she's better than all of us.
Jamie's gonna
look at her. She's so humble. She's like, well, I'm not gonna.
I mean, yeah,
right. But that's, part of that point is like, look, it's not that I don't have confidence, but even someone with confidence who's a grown ass adult, like walking into a room of people you don't know, and I was there because I did want to,
totally.
Like sort of right, you can't hotwire it, but ease my way into things. But yes, she did point out, Gio, that I was the only one doing my thrusters with 35-pound dumbbells.
Yeah, but I think that's part of your personality too, right? I think Kat and I are more up to just walk into a group and just allow it to happen organically, right? Because we just are going to let it gravitate towards us, right? We don't need an exact plan, right? That's kind of where you are, right? Is you want to know that you're going to walk in and someone's going to walk up to you and be like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And I'm glad you're here. And so I think it's a personality thing too sometimes. But community is important any which way you look at it, right? Because you get different personality types. Some people just find their way. And some people need a little bit of hand holding. They're a little more timid, a little more shy. And it's really being able to have ways to cater to all those personalities, right? I think that's such an important part. And we see it at our conferences, right? When we're at Juicy or GWA or, just even at happy hours, you get people that have to be introduced into the conversation. They'll walk up and kind of stand outside the circle and wait to be invited in. And then you've got those people that, on the rude side will walk right in and start asking questions. And you're like, well, we're in the middle of a conversation here. And so it's just kind of interesting how you have to be able to read and know personalities and in order to know how to plug them into the community. And sometimes I tell some of my clients and friends, there's times that someone may not ever fit into your community, right? And I think you should be vetting those people out just as much as they're vetting you out.
Yeah, I think that's right. And going back to early days of co-working, people would say, like when someone would come in for a tour that they were clearly not a good fit for the space, they would say, you should go check out and say another space across town, which on one level, people are like, why would you send away a potential member? But on the other level, once you realize that the only thing worse than a non-member is a bad member,
Yeah, I love
like
that.
it just doesn't work for anyone.
So, Kat, I mean,
Yep.
you're more than 10. I mean, you're kind of similar. I started in early 2012, which puts us over 10 years, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what are you most sort of excited about what you see in the industry, and what are you maybe a little like nervous about as things evolve?
I'm excited to see indies really maturing and that there's so much support that small indie operators can join this thing and immediately have like robust circles of support. And there's so much information and amazing models. I'm excited by the whole social club / co-working thing. This is really intriguing. Like, with music and after hours and just really giving people a place, whether they're actively working on something or not, that they can tap into this community and be contributing and connecting. So I like that. What am I nervous about? There's so many people who are now coming in and offering guidance. I want to make sure that we understand that this is still a human thing, even the real estate thing. I want to make sure that the humanness stays intact, because office rental is nothing new. Executive suites were around like 30 years before co-working even came about. Like, this is something different. And the thing that people need to tap into as we're like deep in a loneliness epidemic, super isolated, anxiety, depression, mental health, big time crises. I feel like co-working has a unique opportunity to be part of the solution. And we don't have to carry the weight of like, we're going to fix the loneliness epidemic. And as we go to like a remote first model for a lot of companies, we have an opportunity to let people be part of a community, have a sense of belonging, feel a sense of purpose in a place where they can do their work, whatever their work happens to be. So that piece is really important, like the kind of the transformative potential of co-working. Because with my own story, I was making, like, when I left after 20 years, I was making $17 an hour at the record store. I know. And co-working has helped me grow this whole thing. Like, I went from freelancing on the side to being a full-time freelancer to turning it into a business to now there's this whole ecosystem with all these arms. That 100% has been a product of co-working. So I want to make sure that people who have these kinds of spaces understand that potential so that they can then help their members. Like, what I'm doing in supporting operators, what I'm secretly doing is supporting all of their members, right? Because there's this massive potential there to like create a world with more kind of self-determination, where people can work with more purpose, people can live lives of their own design. Like, that's kind of the big picture here. And I think co-working just has a massive potential to transform how we do our lives.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. So here's a random question.
Okay.
Jamie, you've never asked this before.
I have one random question too.
Are you a cat or a dog person?
Well, I like dogs, but 100% cat.
Okay.
It's true.
And the reason I asked that, Jamie, I know I've never asked this. So I got home yesterday from Alaska, like we talked about earlier. And so Alex, my girlfriend, is a property manager for for a hotel. Jeez, she was an apartment.
You better get this right, Gio.
No, I mean, it's just, I'm trying to figure this out. So she used to be at apartments. Now she's at offices, and she's got a couple retail deals, but she had posted, there was 2 kittens outside of her office building. So I got to the house.
Oh no.
And she had 2 kittens in my house, and I don't want to say I'm not a cat person. I'm a dog person. And so, but these things are the cutest things ever. They're malnourished, everything else. And she told me her superintendent had said there was 3. So we went back out and tried to find the third
You
one.
do this after you get home from Alaska yesterday?
Yeah.
Alex is
Oh,
like,
She's like, well,
surprise!
we'll just look tomorrow. And I was like, no,
there's a missing
it's
kitten.
his siblings. And so we went back out there a second time, and I'm looking everywhere. And finally I see the little thing run across
Hmm.
the patio, and it runs into one of those rat traps, that they have just against just plastic. And so I sat there and waited quietly to see it come out, and it didn't come out. And so I just picked up the rat trap and took the rat trap apart, and that thing was sitting in there all scared.
Oh.
And that the other two were tame. This one was hissing. Sure enough, the two boys were the tame ones, and the one hissing was a
It's caught in a
female.
rat trap. What do you want? She's scared.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But so I've got three
With three
kittens
kittens now.
downstairs in my stand-up shower, and Guido, my dog, is like, "What in the hell are these animals doing here?" But super
It was like a
curious.
giant black lab. Like,
Yeah. So that's where the random question came from. So you're a
Well,
cat person.
Well, Gio, we fostered a litter a long time ago, found them homes, kept a couple of them, and one of them just died and lived to be 17. So be careful if you take on
No, they will not be. They're not finding their home. They're not finding their
okay.
home here.
Okay. Okay.
You're
But
for now.
part of it is you have to find the right place to take them, right? I mean, especially so they're probably 4 weeks old, give or take, right? And so there's a lot of shelters that won't even wean them, right? They'll basically euthanize them from the beginning because they don't want to deal with it. And then there's other shelters that if they don't find homes quickly, so we're trying to find friends that are. So basically, my question was, I'm shipping you 3 cats.
Do not ship me any cats. Liz keeps trying to get me to get another cat. I'm like, I'm good. If I don't need to change cat litter for a while, I'm good.
Okay, my question is, what's your favorite record?
Oh, Jamie, that's such a big, huge question.
Okay, top 2?
Let me think here.
You got to give me a couple after 20 years in a record store.
For sure. How about artists?
Okay.
Okay. So there's a singer-songwriter named Mary Gaucher who is just real deal, just truth storyteller. She's amazing. She's been a favorite of mine forever. And secondly, I really love Iron and Wine. Do you guys know? It's a guy, but he goes by, the name Iron and Wine. My favorite artists tend to be people who do like acoustic storytelling, not so much like folk stuff, but like not traditional folk, but like I really love acoustic guitar. But within that, like you said, I feel like at a record store, it's just a crash course in stuff you didn't even know existed. Turkish psych and just like these ridiculous subgenres, all these experimental things, and deep into all the branches of jazz. And I honestly I have an appreciation for everything, including like doom metal and classical. It's like there's something that I like within everything. So big, huge, hard question. On my Spotify playlist, the things that come up year after year are Iron and Wine. Who else is on there frequently?
So while you're thinking, Iron and Wine, folk rock, indie folk, instruments, vocals, guitar, banjo, piano, harmonica, bass. I mean, super talented. He has an amazing beard. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, he's definitely been doing it for a minute. He's one of those kind of alt folk dudes.
Do you play the guitar?
I do play the guitar and have for a long, long time. I write songs. That's kind of like this whole world that nobody knows exists, which is fine that way. But recently in Hawaii, I think I need to get an ukulele. I think I need to go down that road. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at these days.
Ooh, I like it.
I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
So what interesting projects are you working on these days for work? I mean, anything interesting that has taken up a lot of your attention right now?
Well, so lab and convos are like the two big big things, and then content around all of those, doing more writing. And geez, I wasn't thinking of mentioning this, but since here we are, I'm working on something, and Jamie, it's still very much like in the strategy kind of idea phase of this, but just putting together some more pieces around brand community to help. Like I have the indies, and now I want to figure out how to help people who are kind of pushing into that next level, whether scaling, already have spaces to help them understand the community piece and what that looks like, not in kind of a woo-woo feel good way, but in a smart, savvy business strategy way. Like, this is the future. This is where we're going. People are tired of being advertised at. Marketing is a sea of content. And now with AI, it just got like 10x, and most of it is not very interesting. So what does it look like to be truly attracting people into your brand and community? So kind of putting together some pieces around that, but nothing that is for sure enough to talk about yet. And most immediately, we're celebrating the 3rd anniversary of the lab in a couple of weeks. I don't know when this will run, but what's that? It's crazy.
It's been 3 years. I know. Yeah.
Yep. What a wild ride it's been.
Congrats.
Yeah, and we've all been on it, right? COVID, basically, it's funny as I talk to people about timelines, we so often forget that there's a kind of a gap in between that sometimes that just kind of all ran together, and we're like, oh crap, it really has been 3 years, or it has been 5 years. And so it's funny how there was kind of like a time warp slash just a kind of a time abyss in there somewhere.
So true. I was sitting on an airplane, or anytime I'm in like a crowded space now, I look around, I'm like, did that happen? Like, was there really a time where we were putting like cardboard cutouts at NBA games? Like, yes, that happened. Wild.
I forgot about that. That's
yep.
a good memory. So weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
So what's you have any travel plans coming up for any of the conferences or anything? I know Juicy's doing a couple different things, and then you've got GWA.
I know I'm dying to go to Juicy Australia. Not this year, but
not this year. Huh? You know, I likely will be at Juicy Canada in Toronto. Yeah. Not sure I'll be able to. I can't make Australia. So I'll say that for now, that I'm looking at Toronto for now.
Yeah, Kane Wilmot is hosting that one, which will be fun. I know that was on yeah. Anyway, I think the date didn't work, because I would like to do that too.
And kind of oddly, I have not yet been to a GWA in all these years. So one of these years I need to get out. So you should have me come out and say hey to everybody.
Oh, so definitely make that happen.
Okay.
100%.
Asking ye shall receive.
All right.
It's funny because we're starting to work on the content for all that. We're trying to finalize keynote speakers and all kinds of fun stuff right now.
I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, the content committee's got to be starting to get into full swing here.
Yeah. And I know that you helped Liz with a bunch of her stuff, as well as she's trying to put it all together and make intros and stuff like that. So certainly be reaching back out to have some of those conversations. So what's your golf league look like? I mean, is it weekly? Is it kind of
it's great. And I'm a little bummed because in Hawaii, I did something to my foot that has as my friend said, the universe is getting you to slow your roll. So I can't play this week, but we play weekly. It's a women's 9-hole league. So I can play on Tuesday afternoons after work, which is sweet. Play up here in Park City. It's gorgeous and such a good way to kind of wind down the week. And they have there's a club championship each week. There are different competitions. We play scrambles every maybe like 4 weeks or so. So it's great. It's golf is something I grew up playing and then got back into it a few years ago, pretty not heavily, but like a little more committed. I'm such an athlete in my soul. Like when I do something, I want to do it really well. I want to get as good as I can. I played basketball and volleyball, went to college on a basketball scholarship. So like, that's part of my, I know. So I have that drive of like, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to get as good as I can. So it's a good way to switch my brain off. Like last year I was golfing with my cousins and I realized I hadn't thought about work in like 3 hours, and that just rarely happens. So it's really good for me just to like turn it off and focus on being outside and the next shot and things. So yeah, the league has been it's been a really good thing this year.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
We have some,
All right,
some
Jamie.
good cat fun facts from this episode. And that's one of our favorite things to do. It's funny because Kat, I tried to put my podcast into an AI like show notes generator. I tried to put it was our who do we just have on the podcast? Uncommon. Why am I blanking on his name?
Chris Davies.
I tried to put Chris Davies into this, and the show notes were horrendous. And I don't know if it was the AI or if I was like, I don't think we really talked about anything. It kept wanting to talk about all the funny stuff we were talking about at the beginning. Like he had a fondue business before co-working. So it tried to give me a title of like from chocolate fondue to co-working. And I was like, no, that's not the point. Anyway, so we like to get to know people a little bit personally and kind of get your perspective on things. So thank you for making the time to do this. Thank you for hanging in there for our tech challenges.
Of course, it's an absolute pleasure.
And maybe we'll get to see you in September.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to it.
Thanks, Kat.